Welcome to Harris Hall. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 14th, 2022 regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. We have a lengthy agenda today. However, I will state right at the start of the meeting that we will be recessing at noon. The Board of County Commissioners and others will be attending the memorial service for former Sheriff Tom Turner, which will take place at 1 o'clock at the First Baptist Church. It's not on Coburg Road, it's the large church just off Coburg Road. I'll give the exact address later. Before adjustments to the agenda, or Ms. Mock-Rice, do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
We do not.
Then I'm going to take a little bit of board latitude and mention that on June 10th, 2022, there was a proclamation of Flag Day and National Flag Week by President Biden. President Biden suggested this. Now, therefore, I, Joseph R. Biden, Jr., President of the United States of America, do hereby proclaim June 14, 2022 as Flag Day, and the week starting June 12, 2022 as National Flag Week. And he goes on with a number of directions for public officials, and he also suggests that we publicly recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. At this moment in time, please join with me. I will lead the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Then we'll move along with the county administration, and the first item on today's agenda is item 2A, which is a public hearing order on resolution 22-06-14-01 in the matter of adopting the fiscal year 2021 supplemental budget number 5, making, reducing, and transferring appropriations. Now, before I turn the panel over to you, Mr. Mock-Rice and Ms. Moody, I'll mention that Commissioner Burney is with us via remote today. So we are a complete full board of 5 county commissioners this morning. Thank you. So we have a Ms. Mock-Rice, I'll turn it over to you, and then I'll begin my script, Ms. Moody.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Good morning. This is the, I think we'll call this the third step in 4 steps of our budget development and approval process. There is first the county administrator's proposed budget, which happened in early May. The budget committee's, oh, this is supplemental, I'm sorry. I jumped the gun. I'm on the next item. I apologize. I'm just going to turn it over to Christine.
Okay. We'll get back to that.
Thank you.
All right. So this is our final supplemental budget of the fiscal year 21-22 budget. Departments review the status of all their funds, looking to make sure that we have the latest projections for both expenditures and revenue, really trying to avoid any type of budget violation, which would just be an over-expenditure of what is actually budgeted. So I will want to point out to you, most of these are decisions made by the board so far. So you'll see things like the ARPA allocations that you've made to land management and others are being put into the budget. There is one item that we have put in preemptively. Finance and Audit is going to hear about a request for an interfund loan to your Intergovernmental Human Services. We've put that in the supplemental so that the authority exists. If we didn't do that, we wouldn't be able to have the loan occur. So if the authority is not given by the board and Finance and Audit, we just won't follow through on that expense. But that is included in here. It's in the amount of $8 million. So you'll hear more about that next week. And then I do want to point out that this looks like a very large supplemental budget. From a budget standpoint, it is. It's over $578 million, which puts the county's budget at $1.6 billion. That is because of the PERS bond that you have authorized. So we have put that accounting into it, that funding that we will receive from the bond sale and then expense it out to PERS. It shows up twice in the budget in different funds. So just want to highlight that that's an accounting issue. That really appears to inflate the amount of money, but it's really just money passing through. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Moody. That's the summary from staff. Then I'm going to explain the purpose of the public hearing. This is a public hearing on a supplemental budget for the current fiscal year budget as allowed under ORS 294-471 and ORS 294.473. This public hearing is required under ORS 294.473 due to one or more funds amending a funds amending expenditures by more than 10% from the current budgeted amounts. Notice of this hearing and summary of the changes was published as details in the supplemental budget and order resolution included in this agenda item, which you can find online. Participants may testify for or against any item contained in the supplemental budget. At this point, I will open the public hearing, and I see no one signed up in Harris Hall. Ms. Williams, do we have anyone signed up electronically to provide testimony on the supplemental budget?
Chair Farr, at this time, I will ask, we do have 4 folks in attendance. If you are interested in speaking in particular to the public hearing for supplemental budget, if you could please raise your virtual hand. Okay, I do see one participant that is raising their hand. And again, this is specifically for the public hearing on the supplemental budget item. So I will.
Thank you, Ms. Williams, and I will ask you to handle the queue for the electronic public testimony for the supplemental budget. Ms. Williams.
Thank you. At this time, I will call Christine Benita. And I will start the 3-minute timer when you are ready. Okay, and it looks like you are self-muted, Christine.
Okay, I'm not sure where the stadium at the fairgrounds falls in, so it might not be this portion.
Ms. Benita, there are elements of the stadium that are included in the supplemental budget, I believe. Is that the case, Mr.
Okay.
Ms. Moody? So, thank you.
Okay, then I'll proceed. So I have lived behind the Lane County Fairgrounds since 1982. And we are close enough to have involuntary participation in everything that goes on there. So when we heard about the stadium idea, some of us created a survey that was given to about 250 neighbors in a 2-block radius around the fairgrounds. 67% were opposed, 25% were undecided, and only 8 in favor. Now, I appreciate the efforts to mitigate issues that will affect the neighborhood, but there are some things that cannot be mitigated. Some of those: cheers from the crowds, headlights, trash left in the neighborhood, and that smell of barbecue that would be hours on end. I had a massage therapy session at home yesterday. About an hour in, my therapist commented that he hadn't heard a single car go by. People walk in our neighborhood because it's quiet. That's my neighborhood now. From my next door neighbor, guitarist and music producer Don Latarski, there has been talk of managing both the light pollution and sound intrusion of the proposed facility, but the truth is you can't really manage nor direct bass frequencies. They are omnidirectional and flow out like waves in all directions. So it doesn't matter in which direction you point a speaker. Don't be fooled by promises from people claiming to be able to control the sound. It isn't going to happen. And all of the neighbors near and not so near the fairgrounds will pay a very dear price. There's no way you can put a large facility in that area without substantially impacting and changing the character of our neighborhood. Not wanting a stadium doesn't mean we're anti-progress. It means we're for relatively quiet summer days and evenings in our own backyards, less vehicle congestion, and less trash in the street. Commissioner Farr, at the last, 2 weeks ago, you said you like the sound of the crack of the bat. I do too, but it doesn't belong in a neighborhood of family homes. Consider instead a complex like other cities have done at another location, like the one that was considered near Jerry's. And I attached a mock-up design that to my comments. You could host youth practices and games and the M's. Families would come for their games, for their kids' games, and stay for the M's games. So you would get people out there. There'd be room for expansion and less need for mitigation. It would be a true asset to the community.
Thank you, Ms. Benita, and thank you also for the written testimony that you provided. Ms. Williams, continue.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, If there's anybody else that's interested in speaking to the public hearing for the supplemental, please raise your hand at this time. I do not see any other hands raised, so I will turn the meeting back over to you, Chair Farr.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. This concludes public testimony. I will now close the public hearing. Additional comments, Ms. Moody?
Thank you, Chair Farr. No additional comments.
And I'll open it to discussion from the board. Any discussion from the board? I see none. Then I will ask for a motion. Vice Chair Trieger.
Chair, I move passage of Order and Resolution 22-06-14-01 in the matter of adopting the FY 21-22 Supplemental Budget number 5, making, reducing, and transferring appropriations.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
I'll second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trieger, seconded by Commissioner Buck. We have Order 22-06-14-01. Discussion to the motion. I'm seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Now, passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, board. Then we'll move along to the second item on our agenda today, which is the public hearing and work session on fiscal year 22-23 for our 22-23 budget adoption. And once again, we have Ms. Moody with us. And Ms. Moody, I am looking for my script. There we go. So then initially, Mr. McCroskey, I'll turn it over to you. We have discussion, presentation from the staff.
Well, the point that I was trying to make in the first item, but the item that you just approved, of course, was the supplemental budget number 5. And so we have 4 different, just for the public's benefit, and those who don't watch regularly our budget process, we have 4 different steps in the process. The county administrator's proposed budget, which happened in early May, the budget committee's approved budget, which happened at the end of May. And now we're in the third step, which is the adoption, the Board of Commissioners adoption of the budget. The fourth step is the last item you just did, which is the supplemental budget. And we do that several times a year to amend the budget as revenues and expenses change in the course of the year. So that's all to say that we've had a lengthy process, as we do every year. It's a very deliberative and thoughtful process with members of the community that the Board of Commissioners appoints to the Budget Committee to serve with the 5 of you on the Budget Committee, with all of our staff and leaders across the organization to develop the budget. And so now we're here today for the public hearing and the work session before the adoption next week, ultimately, of the budget. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Moody to walk through any additional items, but I just wanted to set that context for those who are watching, where we are in this really robust budget process that is required by state law. So every county goes through a very similar process as we do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Farr. So the additional comment I would make is just that the public hearing is on the approved budget. So what was just mentioned is what the Budget Committee approved. That budget has been published in the Register Guard. So you're seeking any comment on that approved. Then we will move into a work session on any changes that might be occurring between the approved before you adopt next week.
Thank you, Ms. Moody. This is a public hearing to discuss the budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2022, as approved by the Lane County Budget Committee on May 19th, 2022. This public hearing is required to be held prior to final budget adoptions under ORS 294.438. Notice of this hearing and summary of the changes was published as detailed in the public hearings agenda item. Participants may testify for or against any item contained in the approved budget. At this point, I will open the public hearing and I'll call for testimony from anyone inside of Harris Hall. Ms. Williams, I see none inside Harris Hall. Do you have anyone signed up for public testimony electronically?
Thank you, Chair Farr. I do have 3 folks, one with their hand raised. So I just reiterate, if you can please raise your hand if you're here for a public hearing, in particular to the budget adoption item. You could please raise your hand at this time. There will be public comment following this. Okay, I I see a hand did go down. So at this time, I do not see anybody in particular to discuss the public hearing for the budget. I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Farr.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. At this time, I will close the public hearing and ask for additional comments from the staff.
No additional comments on this approved public hearing.
Excellent. Then we have no additional action on the public hearing required by the board. So we have before us, let's see. We don't have, no further action. I guess that's my words are solid there. No further action required on this, Mr. Mokrajewski. So anything else before we move along down the agenda, Ms. Moody?
Just the work session piece that I will point out to you. It's kind of combined with this because it leads into next Tuesday. So I provided you a handout. It will be posted online with changes that departments have submitted, known changes that need to happen to the approved budget before we adopt. So you have a handout in front of you. It's a variety of items, FTE changes. Many of them happened in Supplemental 5. And so now they need to continue past July 1st because Supplemental 5 only goes through June 30th. So it's kind of you have to budget it twice to get it in both years. You'll also see some rebudgeting. What we mean by that is expenses that we thought were going to occur in 21-22 did not occur. You'll see quite a bit of that in the road fund, over $4 million. And so we assume that we will carry that cash forward because it wasn't spent and we're going to plan to spend it next year. So those are the big items that I would highlight for you there.
Then Ms. Moody, we at the podium have a hard copy of the document in front of us. Is this available online for people watching online and for Commissioner Burney, who is not here with us?
I emailed it to Commissioner Burney last night.
Very good. Then Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I just have one request when this is posted publicly, if you could include a glossary just for the acronym, the adjustment type. There's a key to those abbreviations would be useful for
I think it's very tiny at the bottom, but you're right. I will make it bigger. I can barely see it even sitting here. So I will check my font sizes. What I will do. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
And Chair Farr, so we are also here. If the commissioners had any adjustments that they would like to see to the approved budget, this would also be the point where we could make those changes and bring it back. The one thing I will highlight again is that we cannot change expenditures. We cannot increase them in any fund by more than 10% between approved and adopted.
Then I'll look to the board. Are there any changes that you'll request for this year's adopted budget? Ms. Moody, I see none. Then we can move forward with any further item. Chair Burney, Commissioner Burney, I see your hand raised now. It's kind of disguised up in your books up there.
I'm sorry. Would you prefer for me to go like this when I want to talk?
I think you have two sets of eyes on it, and
okay. My question, Ms. Moody, is this is a very minor item, but I just want to confirm it's in there. I spoke with Mr. Mokrajewski about this earlier. Within this budget, it's hard to see everything, right, in a budget of this size. Within this, is there budget from our elections division to print voter pamphlets for distribution during off-year elections or no?
When we did check with staff on that, even back with the proposed budget, we checked in with the county clerk. She indicated that she believed there was budget to accommodate that a lot of it was more about the staff time. And so because you already have your staff time fully budgeted, that did include those expenses.
Well, if that's the case, then why was the rationale of no, we didn't have a budget for that always the reason we were told that it made no sense to do that without approving a budget to support them?
And I would say, Chair, my recollection regarding that issue is that it was less about the budget, the cost, and more about the staff time and the schedule of the election and the amount of time that staff had to do that. So the voter pamphlet for statewide elections is paid. The state actually provides funding during those, when they're statewide. elections. It's the off-year elections that it's not funded. And so, again, our clerk, and I think we feel like we have the funding available to do it. I think probably what's more important is for the Board of Commissioners to establish a policy that's your expectation that be done, so that it's not what has happened in the past. When I say the past, probably for many years that I've been here, prior to several of the commissioners that are currently on the board, there wasn't clarity about whether or not we were going to do a voter pamphlet at every election. And so oftentimes it was, a few months before the election, and then the board may express a desire to do that. And it was staff sort of scurrying to make that happen. So I think what's important really is for the board to establish the expectation, if that is your expectation, that the board establish that as an expectation to be done at every election.
Thank you, Chair. One more thing, I won't belabor this. I want to make something that should be a non-issue. Mr. Mokraheiski, when we spoke when I was chair, you said you would make sure that would be built in, and now you're saying it's policy. So if it's policy, when would this board need to entertain that policy so this doesn't become an issue anymore? What would be the time frame for that? Because now I'm hearing a different explanation.
Commissioner Burney, if I may add that there is an agenda item scheduled for June 21st next week, specifically to discuss the county voters pamphlet, at which point I think we'll get a lot of information that maybe hasn't been presented so far, and time for lots of questions potentially.
Thank you, Chair. I yield that. I wasn't aware of that.
And Chair Burney, I wasn't really until this morning myself, so very good. Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Burney. Any further discussion from the board? Then I believe this concludes our agenda item, Ms. Moody, unless you have further presentation, Mr. Mokraheiski. Okay, cool. Thanks. Then we'll move along to any emergency business. Mr. Mokraheiski.
We have no emergency business today.
And I'm looking to the board. I see no emergency business. Then we'll step directly into public comments. Speakers will be taken in the order in which they sign up, and you'll be allowed 3 minutes to speak. At the end of 3 minutes, the mic will be silenced. There'll be no warning prior to the 3 minutes elapsing. So keep an eye on the clock. If you're electronic, you can keep an eye on the clock on your computer. If you're here in Harris Hall, the clock will be on the large screen to my left, to your right. So today for public comments, I see no one in Harris Hall signed up for public comments. Ms. Moody, do we have an electronic queue? Ms. Moody, I'm sorry, Ms. Williams, do we have an electronic queue?
Chair Farr, we do have 3 folks in the queue. So at this time, I will just reiterate, if you are interested in speaking to public comment, if you could please raise your virtual hand, and I will give you 3 minutes and call on you one by one. All right. At this time, I see 1 hand raised. Moment, let me get the clock ready. At this time, I'm going to call on David Eigel. David Eigel, you are unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
As you can see from the materials I have furnished to you, the Oregon Black Pioneers exhibit at the Lane County Museum of History is dishonest and disgraceful. The Black Pioneers have more than demonstrated that ignorance and bigotry are human traits. They have exhibited their own ignorance and bigotry. The preposterous narrative that they have put forth is embarrassing in its crudity, its lack of scholarship, and its dishonesty. The Lane County History Museum is a tax-supported institution that is supposed to preserve and educate as to our heritage. Instead, it has been co-opted to smear the legacy of many of the residents of Lane County in the 1920s. This includes many leading citizens who were significant contributors to this community. An example is Shai Huntington, the U of O football coach, is listed among those who were members of a group of people who went about shouting racial slurs in marches around the city. This is not only nonsense, it's cruel and unjust. His wife was one of the founders of the museum that eventually became the Lane County History Museum. The lies that have originated in the New Yorker Michael Schill's University of Oregon have spread and served to corrupt other institutions in society. Great pain has been inflicted on the Huntingtons and other families. This needs to be addressed. I call upon the commissioners to take immediate action to shut down, or at least to see to it that the public are informed that the exhibit is fraudulent and doesn't reflect the actual history of Lane County. I also call upon the commissioners to select an appropriate way of publicly honoring Professor Frederick Dunn, the widely beloved man who was the proud descendant of some of the most heroic and courageous abolitionists in America. The Black pioneers have spread lies about this man. Professor Dunn appears in history proudly talking about his abolitionist ancestors and playing the role of Little Harry, the Black slave child in Uncle Tom's Cabin, not in leading a violent racist hate group that never existed. Please feel free to contact me with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I see Gary Rose. You have your hand up. I've unmuted you and I will start your timer when you start speaking.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Gary Rose. I have a little construction outfit here in Florence, Oregon. I spoke to you earlier about the burned down house on the F2 zone that was not being able to be rebuilt. I was just kind of wondering if you guys had kind of got off your duff and done anything to help get that going. I have. I've talked to a senator and I've talked to a person from the House of Representatives. They're more than willing to jump in with this and put forth a resolution to take care of this. We need some help on this. We need you guys to do something. Also, I got more questions on the F2 land. The suit, there was a lawsuit with the excuse me, Kempridge LLC case. I believe Lane County really dropped the ball, and you boys should have been, and girls should have been involved in this. You sat back and let somebody cost them $60-some thousand to fight that, and it was all because of the F2 zoning that the Lane County did. Just for your information, there's 6,667 parcels zoned F2. Of those parcels, there is 2,973 that are below 10 acres. Out of that 6,667, there's only 308 parcels that are above 80 acres and able to be developed. The big game habitat is a joke. I mean, you can't zone something F2, a 1 acre lot, and call it major big game habitat. It's not. I've talked to the Fish and Game. Their biologists agree with what I'm saying. The 80 acres was a recommendation. It was not a requirement. They wanted anything below 80 acres, they wanted to be notified of it. And if there was some mitigation they could do to make it work, they would allow houses on less than 80 acres. We need you guys to step up and work on this F2 zones. If you don't, we will. I've got right here, I got a printout of all of the F2 zone properties in Lane County. I'm very willing to start licking stamps and sell this out to people so that we can get your attention. I don't think just me coming in here speaking is going to get your attention very well. So if I don't hear something about you guys moving on something to remedy in this F2, then we're going to do a mailing and get something going. So please help the rural residential people that are getting left out in the cold. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I see one additional hand raised. And just a reminder, if you are interested in speaking at public comment today, do please raise your virtual hand and I will call on you. So Harry Sanger, you are next up in the queue. And I will start the timer. And it looks like you are ready to go. Maybe self-muted.
Let me make sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
So thank you for allowing the forum today for public comment. I appreciate all the other verbal comment and the written comment that was submitted before me. You all have a lot on your plate, and I, for a while there, was showing up every week to speak to you, and not because I want to take center stage. I really don't. I'd like to step back and let you all do your jobs, but you know, we faced a difficult time during the pandemic, and really all I ever wanted was for people to just be able to move on and embrace the old normal, not some kind of like new normal that's not normal at all. And so I'm really happy to look around our community right now and see smiling faces, see musicians touring again, see meetings going back to in person where everybody can sit in the same room. I'm sorry I can't be there with you today. It is hard to make meetings during the day, so this hybrid format is nice. Thank you. But I see that COVID cases are rising again. I see people mumbling, you know, are we going to go back to having masks and segregating based on vaccination status? And I'm pleading with you, don't do that. We can look right now and see what happened from the bad government policies, not only in the county, but across the state and across the nation. And I just ask everybody, you know, are we enjoying this new scarcity economics that are a direct result of these government policies that were shoved down people's throats over the past 2+ years? Are we understanding yet that equity doesn't mean raising up everybody to a same high standard of living, but rather lowering the standard for everyone to bring everyone to some base level that's called fair, where nobody has really anything, and gas costs more and food's harder to get, and services like summer camps are not available. If people have kids, finding a summer camp for your kid is very tough right now. This is the new normal. I don't like it. I don't think a lot of people like it. You know, we saw some of that in the election, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Burney, you know, you really stepped up in the last couple of weeks and started representing people in the way that people expected to be represented. But what happened during the pandemic was not what people wanted. And so I hope that the county commissioners understand that, hear that, and that Lane County Public Health exerts a recommendation status, but not a controlling status that we all lived through, and has brought us to the point where we are now. We can do better. We need to do better for ourselves, for our children, for our community. So I know you have a lot on your plates. I'm going to step back into the sideline here and let you take over. And thank you for everything that you do. Have a great day.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I will do one last call. If you're interested in speaking at public comment today, do please raise your virtual hand. And I do not see any additional hands raised, so Chair Farr, I will turn the meeting back over to you. Thank you.
Ms. Williams, thank you for handling the electronic queue, and there is no one else signed up in Harris Hall. Then we'll move along down the agenda to Commissioner's response to public comments and or other issues and remonstrances. I will look to the board for a queue. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just respond to Mr. Rose regarding F2 zoning. We've been discussing this quite a bit in the last few of our board meetings. So if you have a chance, feel free to go online and review our board meeting webcasts, and you will be able to see our larger discussion about both of these issues. We have taken both of them very seriously, and there are steps that are underway in order to address both of them. If you have further questions, I would highly encourage you to call Keir Miller in our land planning department, who knows all the full ins and outs of both of those subjects. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Further remonstrances from the board? Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. And I want to appreciate everyone that spoke in public comment, and also Christine that spoke during the supplemental budget hearing. Want to real quick just say that, you know, I have great concerns about the NIMCIS decision and the impacts on F2, and I will continue to push for a resolution there. The issue about reconstruction post-fire or other, you know, accidental destruction of a home really is a legislative fix ultimately. And I am told right now that our permit department has not denied anyone yet. So I encourage the person that's out there in the Florence area to make the application for their permit, and I think it will be looked at in a friendly manner at this time. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're referring that to the that issue on the big game to our planning commission. I wish it had stayed at the board level, but that was a decision of the board. It's still alive to be addressed. It is a major issue for a lot of property owners. And I just want to note something here on Flag Day, that our Constitution was unique at the time it was written. It was the first time people recognized that government derives its power from the people. It starts with the three words, "we the people," and it granted certain powers to our federal government. The Pledge of Allegiance was written to try and change that. It was written by a socialist to train school children to pledge allegiance to the state, which is in exact opposition to what our Constitution says, that the state derives its power from the people. What I would encourage folks to do is to look at our oath of office. And that's what, when we start meetings, the five of us should be pledging allegiance to the people that give us power, not to the state. We shouldn't be asking the audience to pledge allegiance to a state, because we derive our power from the people. So I don't refuse to say the pledge. I'm not going to protest that, but I just want people to understand it was originally written to teach school children that the state has supremacy and power over them, when in fact the state derives its power from the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. Further remonstrances? I see Commissioner Bernie's hand raised.
Thank you. Two things. One, I don't know about the rest of you or the public watching, but I pledged allegiance to the flag every day that I was in school, from kindergarten through the 12th grade. We were never taught what Commissioner Bozovich just said at all. We were taught that we were pledging allegiance to a symbol that represented the very Constitution, where the state gets its power from the people. So I think that the theoretical stuff that people try to make issues of, I think turn down the temperature, chill a little. Chair Farr, I can't thank you enough for starting the meeting with the pledge. Almost every other body I'm a part of does the same thing, and it's not pledging allegiance to a socialist state. It's pledging allegiance to the symbol of our democracy. The second thing I would like to say is that I've had a few emails suggesting that I'm afraid of COVID, and that's why I'm doing these meetings remotely. So I would like to clarify that, if I may, Chair. A little over 2 weeks ago, I had something that I've avoided for my 60 years of living with juvenile diabetes. And that is that my wife and I had to take a trip to the emergency hospital at McKenzie-Willamette, and I ultimately had to have an amputation. I'm healing from that amputation. It is my fervent hope that I will be physically present, although I might need wheelchair assistance from the parking garage to the boardroom, but I will be physically present starting in July. I can't confirm that. I would like to also thank Chair Farr and Vice Chair Trieger and Commissioner Buck and Mr. Mokraheisky and many staff that have both called me and expressed condolences and texted to make sure I was okay. Your compassion has not gone unnoticed. But I would just like to clarify, this has nothing to do with anything other than an amputation and healing after that. And I hope that's now on the record. And thank you so much, Chair, for allowing me the indulgence to explain that.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Further remonstrances, Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. You know, it was just a few weeks ago, we were sitting here in this meeting when the news came in about the shooting in Uvalde, Texas, and we took sort of a moment. It took our breath away for a moment for those of us that hopped on to look at the news when our county administrator was visibly shaken, having gotten that news, and we haven't really addressed that. And since in remonstrance, we've brought up school children and we've brought up who elected us to represent them, I want to give a shout out of appreciation to an incredible group of middle schoolers who put on an event on Saturday that I attended in the pouring rain with hundreds of folks from our community. It was part of a national March for Our Lives, which is a student-led anti-gun violence movement. These speakers were passionate and articulate and thoughtful and clear and literally begging us to protect them. Literally sharing stories of the fear that they face every day going to school, of the drills they have to endure, of the language they've had to learn since kindergarten age around gun violence, and what they are at risk of simply for being children in schools in this country, with its unwillingness to have a spine and stand up against an industry that produces lethal weapons and allows them to be in the hands of just about anyone. I want to appreciate staff that I've been in touch with, including our sheriff and the folks in public health and Lane Event Center staff, because I've had lots of conversations and calls and emails from constituents asking what we as a county can do to help protect everyone in our community, but particularly children. And we have a very limited opportunity as a local government to pass any kind of regulations or laws limiting access to firearms. But I think there's a lot, particularly in our public health staff, that we're doing on the prevention team to ensure at least that folks in desperate mental health crisis don't take the option of using that most lethal method. We just have so much work to do as a community and as a society, as a country, to protect our most vulnerable members, particularly children. So I just, again, very much want to appreciate the organizers and the students for their bravery and their honesty and their tenacity in addressing this really critical and devastating issue that's happening all around the country, and here in Lane County is no exception. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. Further remonstrance or comments? Then I'll just add a couple quickly myself. The first one being about oaths. Wasn't going to mention it, but in 1977, I swore an oath, and my oath was that I absolutely and entirely renounced and abjured all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty. I took that oath. I'm the only one up here who did, and that was when I became a citizen of the United States. I took that pretty seriously, and I understand discussions that surround the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag and other oaths. About a year and a half later, I took an oath as an officer in the United States Army. With both of those oaths, I pledged to do a lot more than just be a U.S. citizen. I pledged that I would bear arms. I pledged to bear arms in both of those oaths. So, we all do have different oaths, and we say different oaths for different things. And I certainly appreciate that. Commissioners, as you look out across the way there, what do you see through the window? I see a farmer's market. Oh my gosh. And I see outside booths, and I'm guessing that there are booths inside that building over there in our year-round farmers market. Mr. Mokrahajski, we had a ribbon cutting ceremony last week. A lot of people attended the ribbon cutting ceremony. Unfortunately, there were no farmers with produce there, but they did have a separate ceremony on Saturday, where throngs of people came to look at Lane County's new public farmers market, and it's pretty wonderful. Anybody disagree with me on that? So it gives our farmers in Lane County an opportunity to sell and present their goods year-round in a climate-controlled environment, which we've never had before. So I'm really proud, Mr. Mokrahajski, the work that you personally did to make that happen because the county did pledge money toward it. And also it wasn't an easy process. The land swap that occurred about 3 years ago, we signed the deed over in the park blocks across the way, deeding that portion of Lane County, the land, which was the butterfly parking lot. And here we are 3 years later with something that really will stand for generations. It's pretty marvelous, Ms. Mulcahy. Thank you very much for that. The last thing that I'm going to mention is something that I did talk about a little bit earlier, and at about 11 o'clock, at about 11:50, a procession will leave the Lane County Fairgrounds, travel down Washington Street and in on 7th Avenue. This is a procession to the memorial service for former sheriff, former Florence police chief, and former City of Eugene police Lieutenant Tom Turner, who passed away on May 11th of 2022. We all miss Tom Turner. Tom was a great public servant, and I'd like to invite anyone who is listening to this to what will be a memorial service that will take place at 1 o'clock at the First Baptist Church, which is at 3550 Fox Meadow Avenue here in Eugene. Now, to get there, it's about 4 miles from where we're sitting. You travel out Coburg Road, about 3.8 miles from the river to the First Baptist Church on the left. We'll be memorializing Tom Turner today, and for that reason, there will be no afternoon meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, Mr. Mulcahy. We've arranged for tomorrow to be a full commission meeting day. So with that, we'll move along with the consent calendar. Today, board, we have before us a consent calendar. All the items in the consent calendar have been will be enacted by one motion. Any opportunity to pull any item has been offered to the Board of Commissioners, and no items have been pulled. So, do I have a motion for the consent calendar? Vice Chair Trieger.
Chair Farr, I'm happy to move passage of consent calendar, and then we can come back to recessing and meeting as the Joint Board of Health. Would you like to? Since we're on it, and this usually only takes a minute to do the consent.
Dr. Warren, I apologize. I stepped right on your toes, all 10 of them. I apologize for that. So since we have moved forward with the consent calendar, Ms. Mulcahy, I think we will go ahead and pass the motion. Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Then I'll move passage of the consent calendar for Tuesday, June 14th, 2022.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Trieger, seconded by Commissioner Buck. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Commissioner Bernice says aye. All those passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And my apologies again for all of my. I continued even after I snubbed you, Dr. Warren. I continued to stumble. So at this point, I'll gather my thoughts, and at the sound of my gavel, the Board of County Commissioners will recess, and we will reconvene as a joint meeting of the Board of Health and Board of County Commissioners. And Ms. Mulcahy, I'll turn it over to you to introduce Dr. Warren and the panel, and we'll move forward with the Board of Health meeting.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. So this is our regular update on COVID-19 response and recovery. And I think the comment I just want to make is that, related to some public comments and things that we've heard, that through the 2+ years of this pandemic, we've been very focused. Our public health authority, the Board of Health, and our Lane County Public Health division within Health and Human Services has been very focused and diligent about playing the role of informer, educator, advisor, consultant to the broader community, to the broader public, as well as stakeholders within the community, partnerships with the University of Oregon, with with higher education, with K-12 education, with our business community. The Board of Health and our Lane County Public Health have not pursued strict restrictions, imposing laws or rules on the community, because we've had the view that really it's through collaboration and through incentivizing and informing the community that we can come together and compel folks to act in certain ways that are beneficial to the broader community health. And one of the focuses certainly that our public health officials have had is preserving the capacity of our healthcare system within the community, so that it's not just folks who are affected by COVID-19 through the pandemic, but everyone else who has to use. I will share that certainly we've heard from Commissioner Burney here today about a very significant procedure that he and his family went through. Many examples of families that have had, through the pandemic, deferred medical care and other challenges. So I just wanted to share that context, that so we certainly understand and we hear the frustration and concern that some folks have had around the challenges throughout the pandemic, but I just really want folks to understand the care and focus that we have had on not imposing restrictions, but rather on working with the community and compelling action to achieve those outcomes. And when we look at our vaccination rate and the rate of disease in the community throughout the pandemic, Lane County's done a really phenomenal job without having to impose those really strict rules at the local level. So I want to share that, and I don't want to take the thunder from Dr. Warren here, but I'll turn it over to you to walk through the update.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Chair and Co-Chair Trieger. I'm happy to be here. I'm here to provide we've gone to a monthly update for COVID, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what our data look like, and then also the CDC movement to the community level in high risk, and a little bit about what that means as well for us as a community, and then a bit of an update on just what we're doing here locally as well, and any time for questions that you might have. So I did share the screen, but I don't know that it's not coming up. Don't know if that is a technical issue of something that we could.
Jocelyn, I'll go ahead and share mine and take it over.
Okay, thank you, Diana. Okay, very good. Okay, first I want to let you know too that we are moving to weekly reporting. Part of that is because it's important to focus on trends rather than daily numbers at this point in the pandemic. It is also a reflection that daily numbers tend to fluctuate a little bit, and that can also present some issues in reporting. For example, in cases, a case that had been in Lane County might be found to have been actually a resident of Lynn County or another county. So there can be some small changes from day to day. So the importance of trends is really what we're focused on now for reporting. Diana, you can go to the next slide, please. Also, daily updates are rather resource intensive. So we are trying to focus our resources where they are most productive. And then, of course, we will return to daily reporting if there is a surge or a new variant. Next slide, please. So the cases that I'm reporting are lab confirmed cases. We know, of course, that those represent some proportion of actual cases in the community. We do ask that residents report their positive home tests, and we are getting some tests reported. On average, we get between 90 and 100 cases reported weekly over the last few weeks from home tests. So we do encourage, though, folks at home, if you have a positive home test, to please visit our website and report that. It does help us get a sense of overall what's happening in our community and a chance for us to connect you with services if needed. So looking at this graph, and this has just been updated today too. So for folks that are at home, these data are available on our website. Our total reported cases now are 63,984, with 997 cases reported the week of 6/4. So that's June 4th, the last full week. The test positivity rate for the week was 9.9%, and that's compared with a state average of 12.2%. Our 7-day rate per 100,000 is 264.6 cases. That's very high. There is a lot of active COVID disease in our community. It's a little bit higher than the state average now, which is at 259.8 per 100,000. That has fallen below and gone above the state average a little bit here and there over the last few weeks, but it's hovered about the same rate. And as you'll see from this case rate, we're looking like we're plateauing. There was a bit of a spike around the week of May 9th, but since then it's been hovering around that 260 per 100,000 population for the last few weeks. As far as hospitalizations and death, and these data also have just been updated today. In the previous week, we had 24 cases that were admitted. That's come down slightly over the previous few weeks. Again, we had another spike around May 7th. So overall, there are 27 cases in Lane County hospitals from all counties, 2 in the ICU, and there is nobody needing a ventilator at this time. Our total number of deaths to date is 558. Next slide, please. Actually, next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the CDC report. This is, of course, very important. A lot of the folks in our community follow the CDC, as they should. I think sometimes the data that CDC provide are not always in line necessarily with what we have here locally, and that is because there are different data sets that are used and different time periods when that data are drawn, and sometimes there is a bit of a conflict. So that we moved into this high level on Friday, and the data set that really, and we are above the 200 cases per 100,000 population. So on that, we absolutely agree. We have a high number of cases in our community. What is a little bit different is how we constitute hospital capacity related to COVID admissions. Our COVID admissions over the last few weeks appear to be down. So this could reflect a lag in reporting data of the federal database that is used by the CDC. It's hard to have insight into that because we don't have access to that database, and neither does the state, actually. It is only a federal database, and it also is not community level. This data actually reflect what's called a health service area, or an HSA, which is larger than the county. So it's a little bit difficult to compare. It's oranges and apples. It's very different. But according to this community level, this 11 new COVID admissions per 100,000 population exceeds the cutoff by 1. So it does just tip us into the high level. To exceed it on the staffed inpatient beds, it also has to exceed 10%, and we did not meet that measure for high. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that we use different data sources and different times when we draw the data. We have moved to our weekly data report, as I mentioned, and those data reflect the data the week from Saturday to Friday. And that was really intended to give us Monday to review and assess the data, and then have Tuesday to be able to present to you here at the board and be able to update our website on Monday afternoon so that our community can have a sense of what happened in the previous week. Next slide, please. So the CDC also outlines what the public health response should be as you move into these different levels in the community level. At low level, individual and community level recommendations focus on best practices in infection prevention and control in community settings, in addition to promoting, of course, up-to-date vaccination as the frontline strategy to protect from severe disease. These also include improving ventilation, testing to identify infection early, and following recommendations for isolation and quarantine. The medium level, which shares a lot of the same recommendations as high level, strengthens the emphasis on protecting people who are immunocompromised or at increased risk for severe disease. Community settings such as schools, workplaces, and high-risk congregate settings such as correctional facilities and homeless shelters should implement enhanced prevention measures such as screening testing to quickly identify infections. Next slide, please. In addition, at the high level, additional recommendations for individuals and communities focus on wearing masks indoors in public and providing added protection to populations at high risk. As I mentioned, the high risk populations include those in congregate settings, and our health officer, Dr. Patrick Ludke, works closely with the jails on prevention of infection and infection control measures there. And also Colt Gill recently sent a letter to the school districts also highly recommending indoor masking at this point during high community transmission. It's also important that people remember to be up to date on their vaccinations. If I could just say that one more time, there are boosters available, and we also have vaccination clinics hosted by public health, but the vaccinations are easier to obtain in our community than ever before. Next slide, please. So just to kind of go over what these enhanced prevention strategies include, and that does include requiring masks indoors, enhancing ventilation in our facilities, routine testing for residents and staff, especially in long-term care facilities and schools, considering movement-based screening testing, minimizing movement and contact across housing units or moving people within long-term care facilities, for example, and that's just to keep people in one place and reduce exposure. And then also consider physical distancing where feasible. So the additional sort of everyday strategies that Dr. Ludke recommended when he met with the jail leadership on June 9th included vaccination and boosters, number one, always the front line, standard infection control. We don't want to let our guard down around hand washing, cleaning, and ventilation, testing and the intake process and universal screening for COVID. Also assessing risk for severe outcomes and ensuring that the treatment is available. We have a range of treatments available now in our community. Paxlovid is more available. We also have Paxlovid at the public health department that we are distributing to pharmacies in our area. Isolation and quarantine facilities are still important, staff prevention measures, masks and respirators for all who want them, and then preparing for outbreaks. Next slide, please. So our public health response includes, of course, vaccination clinics. We have moved away over time from the mass vaccination clinics, but we continue to hold many smaller clinics throughout the community. In the past few weeks, we've had clinics at the bus stations in Eugene and Springfield, at the Bethesda Lutheran Church. We also visit some businesses and regularly at schools, in addition to making vaccination available in Florence at several locations. And that complete list of vaccination clinics is available online. Next slide, please. We are also, of course, planning for pediatric vaccines for children under 5. We are working first with our WIC clientele, and we'll be offering clinics on weekends, on Saturdays, starting June 25th, and then follow-up clinics as well to ensure that the whole series is available. There are 3 doses for the Pfizer vaccine and 2 for the Moderna vaccine. It had to be different because it has to be complicated, but we will continue to make that available. And we are getting still assistance from the Oregon Health Authority, and they may be moving to the Valley River Center to do clinics now that the Otson station has closed. We are still working on the lease with Valley River Center. And then we continue to partner with our community-based organizations with clinics as well, including Centro, Head Start, and the Relief Nursery. That will be pending, of course, the availability of the vaccine, which we are hopeful. Next slide, please. They also, of course, we continue to offer testing. We have testing available through the University of Oregon, which is a fantastic resource. There are, of course, private companies that also offer testing. And also then we try to get out to other communities regularly as well to ensure that there are testing available in those communities. And again, that complete list is available on our website. Next slide, please. I was also asked to give some highlights on World's Planning. I know that Patience Winningham will also be here, I think, to provide more detail about what is happening across all of the participants in planning for the World's Games. Public health is part of the Oregon 22 Public Safety Planning Partners. So we've had representation on that group for some time. The collaborative efforts we're working on during the event is, of course, disease reporting. We will be providing surveillance reports. There will be wastewater monitoring, and the Essence data reflect visits to urgent care and the emergency room. We continue to do inspections, of course, of food vendors for festivals and venues. And then our health officers are regularly consulting with event organizers on COVID protocols. Dr. Ludke is working with the medical director for the Worlds, Hans Notenboom, on testing requirements for all participants. He has also connected the lab that will be responsible for the testing, which is a lab out of California, with the state to ensure that those results are reported. And then Krista Dillon is leading that effort on the University of Oregon side with doing the sewage testing and further targeted testing based on what those surveillance results show. Okay, next slide, please. And then just as aside, as we do this all the time, we are also doing tabletop exercises and at Public Health to prepare for any eventuality. So we will be talking about what our response to an outbreak during this time or during the Worlds or in the months following the World Games when there may be other communicable diseases in circulation. So we will be conducting ongoing surveillance for those and working closely with our partners at Oregon Health Authority to monitor for those as well. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. You covered a great deal of area. Then I'll open it to the board for questions if you're prepared. I will note that Health and Human Services Director Eve Gray is also with us and will be here to field any questions that may go in that direction. So to the board, any questions? Looking at Commissioner Burney? No, okay. Vice Chair Trieger, followed by Commissioner Buck.
Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Warren. I have just one question / comment. The indoor masking requirement, is it recommended that indoor masking be required? Can you, and specifically, what are we doing with county buildings? I noticed, for example, I know that the function of jury assembly is separate from a county function, but it is in a county building. We don't have, we have these lovely signs here in Harris Hall about at least that say your masking is welcome here or encouraged, and we provide masks. But I wonder if there's any, this is a question for you or for our county administrator, conversation about posting those signs or something like them in all of our facilities and providing masks at the entrance for the public, particularly in areas like the jury assembly where there's large numbers of folks congregating and staying put for a long period of time.
Would you like me to start? I can talk about the public health recommendation. So it is strongly recommended to mask indoors. We have not, of course, mandated because we have not approached mandating as a very effective way of encouraging behavior, especially at this point in the pandemic. It's been 2.5 years, and we are not seeing the strain on our healthcare system with regard to COVID admissions and hospital use that would really tip us into something that feels like an incredibly urgent situation. And I would like to reserve really elevating our situation and thinking about requirements for those situations where we are in that situation. And it is entirely possible that with additional variants or with a fall surge, that could happen. So I'm also really careful about that. I think, though, that we do know that there's a great deal of disease circulating in the community. I think everybody knows at least someone who right now probably has COVID, and it's hugely disruptive, not only to schools, but also to businesses, I think, and the hospitals. We also see staffing difficulties in the hospitals that are not a result of COVID patients, but certainly related in another way to COVID. So we do strongly encourage, and we absolutely have the posters and the other materials that we can use to encourage and visibly make available that direction, as well as masks themselves, I think would be really critical in these buildings.
Thank you, Dr. Warren.
Yeah, I concur with everything that Dr. Warren said, and just reiterate what Dr. Warren said. We actually had a meeting yesterday with our leadership, our department, elected and appointed department heads and managers to talk about this issue of, how should we approach organizationally issues around masking and dealing with the high risk level that we have currently. If the board, what we've decided is to continue to have the conversation, to be thoughtful about how we continue to encourage folks, but not require, as Dr. Warren indicated, that after 2.5 years, people are wary about it. And we have people here in this room that are wearing their masks because they're not presenting and speaking, right? And so they're making that choice to do that. And we're encouraging people to do that if they feel comfortable. So if the board, I think we certainly would take feedback from the board on that. If you feel like we should be informing and making available. I will say that we do have some issues around a mask supply right now. So we are working to acquire more masks so that we can make them readily available, not just for our employees, but also for the public. And I think there's a reality that we're living with this, and we're going to be living with this disease and the variants of this disease for some time. We now have some defense mechanisms through vaccinations and boosters and things that we know have worked. And as our cases spike, it's good for us to get in the practice of, masking where necessary and appropriate. And I just also would point out about the hospital capacity. So this question was asked yesterday. I asked the question, what does hospital capacity look like? And as Dr. Warren said, our hospitals are not full with COVID patients, but there are hospital capacity issues because of staffing constraints. And people, we talked about a commissioner here, I will share that my spouse is going in to have a surgery on Monday, right? So people that is related to a non-COVID event, but there are people throughout the community that need to access the healthcare system, and that's really what so many of these preventative measures are about. Now it's less about preventing spread because, as Dr. Warren said, we have a lot of folks that are getting infected. What we're trying to do is limit the effects of those diseases and preserve the capacity of our healthcare system to respond to other non-COVID disease issues that people really need.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to wrap up, I want to be clear. I was not floating the idea that we put in a requirement. I wanted clarification on, was it a recommendation to require, and also just encourage, I don't think this is a board policy decision. I think it's an operational administrative one, to post signs. Nobody bats an eye at hand washing signs in bathrooms. And to me, this is a similar, limit the spread of communicable disease by a very simple, low impact measure, which is to wear a mask indoors. And we, as the Board of Public Health and the county, who's been a leader on this issue, simply posting those signs on our buildings to normalize and remind folks of this really simple intervention that will lower the spread of disease. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. Further questions or comments from the board? I mistakenly identified Commissioner Book earlier, so I believe Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. I just want to clarify a number that you threw up there, the new admissions per week per 100,000. And you said that was about the MSA, the 11 per 100,000. Is the 100,000 there the population of Lane County that's being used as the denominator for those 11 admissions, or is it the population of the MSA?
I'm for the total deaths. I'm sorry.
No, for the new admissions per week. Yeah, and for the last week were 11, and it's described as per 100,000. But then you describe that the admissions are really from the entire MSA. But I'm wondering, is the population, is that Lane County's population used to derive that per 100,000, or is that the population of the MSA?
Yeah, the per 100,000 refers to the case rates, and that is for Lane County. We have the total, in the previous week, we had 24 Lane County residents admitted, but there were a total of 27 in Lane County hospitals. So there is a difference. We do often see residents from other counties in our hospital census. For that reason, we are going to be updating our hospital reporting. At one point, it felt like it was more important to talk about Lane County and be very specific about our Lane County data. But when it comes, of course, to hospital capacity, that is reflected by everyone that is entering the hospital. So we're moving to a different, the data systems that it has been called HOSCAP, and that's been updated recently to another system that is still being kind of worked, the bugs are being worked out, and we need to double check daily with the hospital that our census figures are correct. So we are doing that as well. So our daily reporting will be moving to including both the numbers of Lane County residents as well as total residents to give us a fuller sense of hospital capacity.
I get that part, but you gave a new statistic on the next slide. 11 new admissions to the hospital in the last week. And in fact, I would love to see a trending data on that. And it was 11 cases per 100,000. So my question on that, and then you describe that as that's not scrubbed for just Lane County, that was for the entire MSA. Mm-hmm. And I'm asking if the per 100,000 denominator was something that we used Lane County's population to get the per 100,000, or did we use the MSA's population?
So this is the CDC data, so I can't speak super confidently about it, but what I will say is the 259.38, that is per 100,000 residents, absolutely does refer to Lane County, that's CDC. That 11 number, though, the hospital data are the ones that are not limited to just Lane County, and we don't have a great sense of really what the MSA is. I did spent a fair amount of time trying to search the websites, and also got some help from our state epidemiologists, and they also don't have a lot of clarity about that. So I am reluctant to say too much about it, except that I can note that Douglas County's hospital numbers, as the CDC report them, are the same. And from what I understand in Douglas County, they only have one person in the hospital with COVID. So I believe that they were pulled into this MSA as well, but that's just a little sleuthing and not definitive information. I'm sorry.
The state has regions for hospital capacity, so I didn't know exactly. That's kind of why I was asking the question, because then you said that there's this 10 limit that we're one over, that I'm kind of wondering whether the per 100,000 number is even accurate, because I'm wondering what they're using for the denominator on that. So it'd be great to get some follow-up on that, and it'd be great to see trending on it in some ways compared to the case rate trending, because one of the things I think I'm seeing, at least in my data analysis and watching the epidemic and the pandemic, is we may be seeing an increase in case numbers, but case severity is dropping off significantly. Due to people like me that have been vaccinated and have both my boosters. If I do get it, I'll probably have a much, less severe case. And when do we get to the level of where the case rate isn't as important in this, because the severity is so low? We don't track common cold cases because they don't hospitalize that often, or move into pneumonia or other more significant disease. I'd be curious to see that 11 new admissions per 100,000 compared to how many new admissions for motor vehicle accidents in that last week, how many for drug overdoses, how many for coronary and stroke, what's that relative to, because when you throw a new statistic out without anything to compare it to, it doesn't mean a lot to people in the public. So that's would be interesting to me. And my guess is we saw a hell of a lot more motor vehicle accident emissions than we saw COVID, and by a long shot. So should we be putting more traffic deputies on the road, man? sorry, also a public health issue, but a completely different solution. So I just wanted to tease that out a little bit, but yeah, it's great that we're getting less severe. And I will say, we didn't list some things on the vaccination. I got my booster and my wife did at a Walmart pharmacy. Took 10 seconds to schedule it online and go and get my booster. Pharmacies are a great location for folks to get vaccinated and boosters. And a lot of them now have got it down to where it's very easy to schedule.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich, particularly for that last, because that means that I don't have to ask my question. So, but I'm going to kind of rephrase it anyway. But Commissioner Bozovich, you mentioned that severity of cases is severely diminished if people have been boosted, and I was tested positive for COVID after being boosted, and I didn't even have elevated temperature. So it's I can attest to that personally. Now, did I have brain fog? I think so. Yeah, but I forget though. Not to make light of that, I mean, the severity is really diminished, is my understanding across the board. And you've listed public health vaccination clinics at 8 different places. And Commissioner Bozovich just mentioned that most pharmacies are administering boosters. And do you know, Dr. Warren, do they have all of the boosters that people need that are available, or should people call in advance, as Commissioner Bozovich did, in only 10 seconds, as it turns out?
Chair, my understanding is that pharmacies do have the full range. Individual provider practices may have a more narrow range, depending on their own, business decisions. But generally, most vaccines are widely available, and there are more vaccines coming online as well. So there will continue to be developments in that area to make it easier and to increase our resistance as a community to COVID-2 over time.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. And so walk-in at pharmacies is accepted, I understand, and the lines are very, very fast moving. I've witnessed that personally. Dr. Warren, anything else for today's presentation?
That is it. Thank you very much.
And from the board, I see no further questions or comments. Thank you, Director Gray, for being with us this morning. With that, the sound of my gavel, we will be adjourning the joint meeting of the Board of Health and Board of County Commissioners and reconvening as the Board of County Commissioners. Thank you, Dr. Warren. Welcome back to the Board of County Commissioners. And we've already done our consent calendar, Mr. Mokrajewski. So we'll dispense with that and move directly into County Council. And I've spoken with Mr. Dingle, who has no announcements today. We do have executive session following the regular session this morning, however. So Mr. Mokrajewski will move along to County Administration.
Chair, sorry.
I beg your pardon.
No, I'm sorry to cut you off, but before you read the item, if you don't mind, I can do announcements very briefly while Ms. Amato gets her presentation up and going. Is that okay?
Absolutely. So we'll go to item 8B, which is County Administration announcements. We'll be followed by item 8A, which I'll announce subsequent to announcement.
Mr. Mokrajewski, Chair Farr.
Diana.
To also interrupt. Chair Farr, we do not have executive session this morning. It will be time certain for tomorrow at 9 a.m. You will simply read into exec session.
Thank you for that clarification. I will be reading into executive session, but we will not convene until 9 a.m. tomorrow for that exec. Mr. Mokrajewski, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I wanted to give Latife a minute here to get the presentation up and running in case there were any glitches. And I just wanted to share this with you. You all should have received now this. I'm going to hold it up so if Neil can see that. This is our one-page strategic plan. And you see sort of the overview on the front page with our purpose and core behaviors. Is our 2022 to 2024 Lane County strategic plan, our vision, our strategic lenses, these 4 strategic priorities on the front page, really wonderfully graphically illustrated here. And then on the back side is a list of probably 60 or 70 specific initiatives that we're pursuing. This is now the 3rd iteration of our Lane County strategic plan, and we've done these one-page documents for the past 8 years as a way for all of us, for the commissioners to have easy access to this, to be able to look at this, for the public to be able to really quickly and easily understand. If the question comes, what is Lane County doing, right? That we can hold this up and say, well, these are things we're involved in, right? This is kind of at least some of the surface level stuff that Lane County views as a top priority. I want to just call out Judy Williams, who, we all received this, and then I had to say, who did this? And Judy said, well, I did it. And I said, how did you do this? Did you hire somebody to do this? And so I had to extract the information from her because she doesn't tell anyone. She's the last person to take credit for doing any of this work. But I found out that she went and watched a YouTube video. She did it by herself after a quick YouTube video on how to use Canva, which I guess is an app that you use. I don't know, kids these days. A free design app. So there was no cost involved other than the printing of it. And I just wanted to credit Judy, who, has continuously built this strategic planning work and put together. This is really important because if the leaders in our organization and the public don't understand what our strategic plan is about and what our focus is, and our employees throughout the organization can't hang something simple on the wall and point to how am I connected to what the county's goals and priorities are, it doesn't have much meaning. And so that there's an 8-page document that with a lot more detail, you can find this and or I think an 11-page document available on our website. If you go to lanecounty.or.gov, under strategic planning, there's all of that information that you can find. But I just wanted to thank Judy for always doing things like this and never telling anyone about it. So I wanted to just thank her for that great work. And I hope she doesn't get stolen by a marketing and design company here, because she's got a future in this as well. So I think, are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Well, very quickly, thanks for the announcement, Mr. Mokrajski. And, just before the meeting began today, Dana Jones over the intercom said, can everybody in the room please say 2 things they love about Judy Williams? And I didn't know where to start. So thank you for that, Mr.
Or end, for that matter, right?
In fact.
Yes. Yeah,
thank you.
Judy is great. So
please
thanks
continue
for that. And I wanted, you all have met Latife Amato, who is our relatively new here for a few months, equity manager. You've met her virtually, of course. And this is, I found these board meetings in person like riding a bike. You kind of forgot exactly how, and I stumbled a little bit this morning. And this is Latife's first board meeting in person, so she's learning how to ride the bike in front of all of us. But I wanted to just introduce Latife to the board and to those watching, and really excited for her presentation about our equity lens work that's happened and the support letter from the board. So Latife.
Thank you. Well, snaps for Judy. Hi, good morning, Lane County Board of Commissioners. Thank you so much for your time and just opportunity to provide an update on some of the work that we have been able to move along in the last 12 weeks. For those of you watching who do not know me, my name is Latife Amado. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I am the equity manager. I've been here for 12 weeks. So thank you for, okay, here we go. This is not a PowerPoint, so the PDF is a little bit slower here. All right, so what today is really about is to provide you an update on the evolution of our toolkit, but also sort of our plan to operationalize this toolkit across the county. It's also an opportunity to request an action item, which is a new signature, given that we have a new chair, Chair Farr. We want to update the letter of support and be able to put that up on our website. So before we start, I think it's really important that we ground ourselves on why we are doing this work. First, we are a community that is reconciling with our inequitable past, and we are committed to doing better. Also, this work is written into our 22-24 strategic plan. As Steve mentioned, you can find that on the infographic. And then finally, we serve the public, and our external community is demanding this of us. So these are really the reasons why this work is important for us to really operationalize across the county. Now, a little bit of history of how this toolkit came to be. So in 2020, as a result of years of feedback from internal and external stakeholders, Lane County leadership and the Equity and Education Committee formed a subcommittee for the purpose of developing an equity lens for Lane County to use. The Equity Lens was a tool to ensure the implementation of Lane County's Racial Equity Action Plan. And this toolkit was created after research of other equity lens across the nation, but particularly honing in on Multnomah County and the city of Ottawa. So the subcommittee rolled out a draft toolkit, and then various departments piloted the draft. And these were different areas, from the COVID-19 vaccination effort, the holiday farm fire recovery, and Lane County Redistricting Committee. But from this pilot, we had a few lessons to learn before we chose to evolve the toolkit. First, the original toolkit had a universal tool that we hoped would create a universal entry point. But we learned that that is not the way to really roll it out across such diverse departments with varying needs. We needed to offer continuous implementation support, not just a one-time training. And we need to continuously collect feedback to help us make decisions as to where to go next. And then finally, we want to be strategic and intentional about supporting people through the change as well as the utilization of the toolkit. So with these lessons learned, we bring you today a toolkit that is user-friendly. It has multiple entry points, is evolving, and we're really proud of. And an opportunity to really be strategic in how we roll out and collect meaningful feedback and provide that ongoing one-on-one support to every single department. And what we're really aspiring to is that every single department by this time next year is prepared for the change of the utilization of this toolkit. And we're going to be collecting feedback, again, to continue to inform our process. So one of the first things that we did is to add tools based on the different areas that people considered applying an equity lens. And we added really designing, gathering and belonging, recruiting for diversity, and other tools that were not immediately available. We then sort of organized them on these larger buckets, which we are calling contexts. These are 5 contexts in which people do their job here at Lane County and the different entry points that people have to utilize the tool. So you can see here, we have planning through an equity lens, creating culture of belonging through an equity lens, leading through an equity lens, using data through an equity lens, and learning through an equity lens. So these are 5 categories that every single person in Lane County is already doing as part of their work. And it's us really looking at how do we apply an equity lens through all these different areas and contexts. Now, under each of these contexts, we'll have a set of tools that can be utilized. And the idea is that we're going to continue to build and evolve different tools that fit into these different contexts. Now, while the toolkit looks different, it's really just an organization. In essence, it is still the same tool. And the hope was really just to make it more user-friendly, to give all employees a different entry point to start experimenting and using the tool. Oop. So the ask today is that we get an updated signature. So this is the same letter that was signed 2 years ago, but we just want to update the signature and get the new support from the board chair and the rest of the board as well. So thank you, and open for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Motto, and welcome to Harris Hall for your first presentation. You did far better than I've done so far today. So.
Beautiful, beautiful room.
Thank you. Then I'll open it to the board for questions and comments. Moving across the board, I see none pop into the top, so I'm going to embarrass Commissioner Buck.
I'll hopefully get us started. I think this is just a huge leap forward for what we're doing here at the county regarding equity and equity inclusion in general. I know we've been doing a lot of work over the past few years to incorporate it into each department, doing trainings for our employees. And this feels like more of a collective tool to kind of organize that officially for the county, even though we've had, steps along the way. I'm hugely supportive. I want to thank everybody who put in the effort to go through all that it was to make this happen. I know there's a lot of discussions, a lot of meetings, I'm sure, and very thoughtful consideration from the public as well. I can't tell you how excited I am to see this come to fruition, more of an official capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Further discussion? I see none, Ms. Votto. So thanks very much for the presentation. Very concise. Anyone following online can click on view items and they'll see not just the presentation. They won't see the Equity Lens presentation you just presented, but they can find that online also. But today's presentation, the agenda item, and also the letter that you're requesting that the board sign. So Mr. Mokrahajski, do we need action by the board to prompt me to sign the letter?
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. That was going to be my question. If we need action, I am more than happy to ask the board to approve or authorize our chair to sign this letter in support of this really important forward-moving work that we're doing here at Lane County. And thank you for the presentation.
Moved by Vice Chair Trieger. Seconded by Commissioner Buck. That is a direction for me to sign the attached letter, which I will do later on today should we pass this motion. Discussion to the motion, Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. First, I want to say I think there is much good in our Equity Lens work. But I have to say I've been consistently uncomfortable with the concept of equity. I believe very strongly in individual equality and equality under the system. Where, there are a lot of great things in this about, just thinking about the planning portion of it, thinking about, who's going to be affected by decisions, have they been included in the conversations, looking for unintentional barriers to folks. But when you get down to the glossary, I start having problems. And in other places where the desire is to equalize outcomes. And that is never going to happen, because people have different abilities as individuals. And the only way to equalize outcomes is to enforce that equality on people, and sometimes leads to what I believe inequality, not inequity, but inequality, which I have problems with. But you just getting down to the definition of racism in this, where the only way somebody can be racist basically is to have power combined with prejudice. I'm sorry, prejudice is racism. And the fact that you may not have power at the time, it's still racist. And then people express that in different ways, like running cars through Christmas parades. At that time, that person had power, even though they are not from the dominant white society. So I really have trouble with some of those definitions. The definition, there's only one definition of white supremacy put in there. There's no definition of any other supremacy. It just, and this should be able to apply to all humanity. And I think and one of the failures in this whole concept is first the artificial division of humanity that we do, and second, the homogenizing of those groups, and expecting that there is, that group then can be represented by, a few people. And in my experience, no groups are homogenous. There's such a huge variance in trying to define anything from Hispanic. I hosted an exchange student for a year from Mexico. He was shunned by the Mexican students at his high school. Why? Because he was mostly of Iberian descent and part of the ruling class from Mexico. And the rest of the Mexican students there were mostly indigenous background population from poorer class. And he was considered a rich daddy's boy. But they were all Hispanic. That sort of artificial, so it's difficult for me to approve continuing down this road when it includes pieces like that. So I'm going to be voting no on this motion, recognizing there's a lot of good here. just goes a little too far for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich, for the discussion. Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be voting yes on this, and this will pass, and I'm delighted that we're moving in this direction. And let me move this from theory to practice. When we talk about artificial divisions, I think my own Catholic Church, when we look at schools for Native Americans and Native Canadians, artificially divided and created policies as a result of that. When we look at the forced sterilization in this country, which occurred less than 100 years ago, we look at and the impacts of that and who received that. We look at artificial divisions. When we look at Jim Crow laws in this country or slavery, we look at artificial divisions. So don't tell me that artificial divisions of humanity haven't defined and created the need for this kind of a initiative. Now, Ms. Amato, if I may, it's delightful to meet you. I'm sorry I can't be in person, but I will hobble to meet you as soon as I can. I would like to share that as someone that, among other things, consulted with the country of El Salvador as it related to creating a more inclusive economy, creating goods for the people of that country versus an international markets, and creating public-private partnerships. As someone who worked at the University of California, Santa Cruz, when Roberto Rubalcaba brought in as Vice Chancellor of Admissions several thousand children of migrant families across the state, and you really looked at equality of opportunity. As someone who created the country's first migrant farm worker training center in Pajaro, California, as someone who learned a lot from Dr. Eduardo Galarza in terms of education, my question to you as a supporter of this initiative is, what's the goal? How will you talk, and we talk about a culture of belonging? Well, it's much more than that, if I may. It's a culture of where people feel a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose and a sense of competence and a sense of usefulness, as well as a sense of belongingness. So do you have a sense as to what it will look like, first question, in Lane County when we have, that will tell us this work is largely moving forward and we're doing well? What are the measures here?
I do. Is my mic on? I think one of the biggest goals is really moving into a more complex narrative. There's when you explore the toolkit, you will see that this is really an invitation for all of us to start examining the intersectionality of our experience. We are oversimplified in our categories of a BIPOC or non-BIPOC and forgetting about the intersectionality of many of the other pieces that make us human. So it's really an invitation. I think for me, the goal of really us utilizing this lens is for us to move away from fear of what equity means. There is enough for everybody. And we need to really, really expand on the way that we define equity. It's an opportunity for us to be more inclusive without fear of loss, and an opportunity to really invite more diverse perspectives, not just into the work, not just into collecting ideas, but really, really in a collective power. So if we really want to talk about humanity, we really want to think about how do we equally involve people in the type of world that we're imagining. And I think this lens is an opportunity to do that. And when I think about the definition of belonging, I really think it's about shared power. So how do we do that in a way that's going to benefit all of us? And how do we do that so that we all walk away with a much more expansive perspective on what this work really means? Yeah.
Thank you very much. And also, I would just like to say, one commissioner mentioned a white majority, and I believe that is becoming more and more of a myth. Very soon, we will not have a white majority in this country. It will be a beautiful, diverse, and richer for it. And I look forward to supporting your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Thank you, Ms. Amato, for your response. Further discussion? Seeing none, then I'll just say this. I'll cheerfully sign this letter later. And I use the term cheerfully very carefully because that includes joy and just happiness in general, but more significantly with a very serious eye on what the letter actually means. And there are 3 bullet points in the letter that I'm going to just cite ever so briefly, not the entire bullet point, but by applying the lens to our work, we will generate better solutions by incorporating diverse perspectives. We will take positive steps to identify and remove systemic barriers, and we will create a more positive and respectful work environment. Wonderful concepts. So a beautifully written letter. I would once again cheerfully will sign that later on today, and we'll move forward with our work. Any further?
Don't we need to vote to approve your signing that, Chair?
We do, yes. That'll be on the table. That's actually on the table currently. But first, anything else before we vote, which will conclude this item. So thank you, Commissioner Burney, for bringing that up. Mr. Mokrasi, none. Okay, Ms. Amato.
Thank you.
Right on. Then we'll take the vote on my signing the letter as chair of the board and representing the Board of County Commissioners. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Yep. Any opposed?
Nay.
Passes 4-1 with Commissioner Bozovich in the nay. Ms. Amato, thank you very much. We'll move down our agenda now. If you look at today's agenda, we have item 9, which is executive session, item 10, which is other business prior to recess. Other business, item 10, will be pushed to tomorrow's agenda. So we will not get to item 10 prior to the recess today. So with that, we'll be moving into executive session, which will convene at 9 a.m. tomorrow. And I'm going to read us into executive session. At the sound of my gavel, the Board of County Commissioners will be recessed and we will reconvene in executive session in our offices. Ms. Jones, if you're listening, the executive session will begin in our offices. Is that correct? And then we'll move to Harris Hall for the hybrid meeting?
Correct. The executive session will be done remotely, and at 11 a.m. we will reconvene in Harris Hall as a hybrid meeting to have our public hearing.
And I'll repeat that for clarity, mostly for clarity to me, that we will convene an executive session at 9 a.m. in our offices or remote and reconvene as a Board of Commissioners in regular session at 11 a.m. tomorrow. So the Board of Commissioners will meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602D, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive sessions, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise. Prior to my gavel, I'll remind us that there will be a procession down 7th Avenue and out Coburg Road to the First Baptist Church beginning at 11:50 a.m. at the Lane County Fairgrounds for the memorial service for Tom Turner, which will be held at 1 o'clock today.